Question 1. Assessment of how an Indofood CBP procurement officer should ethically handle a situation where a close personal friend's company is bidding for a significant contract managed by the officer. Option A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and the relevant ethics committee, requesting recusal from the evaluation process or for appropriate safeguards to be put in place. Option B. Withdraw from the evaluation process without informing anyone, hoping to avoid any ethical complications. Option C. Subtly steer the evaluation process to favor their friend's company, believing it will strengthen a valuable personal connection. Option D. Proceed with the evaluation, confident in their ability to remain impartial and objective, and not disclose the relationship to avoid any perceived awkwardness. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and the relevant ethics committee, requesting recusal from the evaluation process or for appropriate safeguards to be put in place. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee of Indofood CBP to navigate a situation where a potential conflict of interest could arise, impacting the integrity of procurement processes. The core of the challenge lies in balancing business relationships with the ethical obligation to ensure fair and transparent dealings. Careful judgment is required to uphold Indofood CBP's reputation and adhere to its internal policies and relevant Indonesian regulations concerning business ethics and procurement. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the personal relationship to the relevant authority within Indofood CBP, such as the procurement manager or ethics committee. This action aligns with the principles of transparency and good corporate governance, which are often mandated by Indonesian company law and reinforced by internal codes of conduct. By disclosing, the employee allows Indofood CBP to implement appropriate safeguards, such as assigning the vendor evaluation to an independent party, thereby preventing any perception or reality of bias. This proactive step demonstrates integrity and commitment to ethical business practices, minimizing risk for both the individual and the company. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the vendor evaluation without disclosure, assuming personal objectivity can be maintained. This fails to acknowledge the inherent risk of perceived or actual bias, which can lead to accusations of favoritism and undermine the fairness of the procurement process. Such an action could violate Indofood CBP's internal policies on conflict of interest and potentially contravene Indonesian regulations that emphasize fair competition and anti-corruption in business dealings. Another incorrect approach is to subtly favor the acquaintance's company during the evaluation. This is a direct breach of ethical conduct and likely violates Indofood CBP's procurement policies and Indonesian laws against unfair business practices. It erodes trust, damages the company's reputation, and can lead to legal repercussions and financial penalties. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to withdraw from the evaluation without informing anyone, hoping to avoid the dilemma. While seemingly a way to sidestep the issue, this can still be problematic. It might leave Indofood CBP without a qualified evaluator, potentially delaying critical procurement processes. More importantly, it fails to address the underlying ethical obligation to report potential conflicts, which is a cornerstone of professional responsibility within any organization. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's code of conduct and relevant Indonesian laws. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the first step is always to identify the conflict. Subsequently, the employee must assess the severity of the conflict and its potential impact. The most crucial step is to proactively disclose the situation to the appropriate channels within the organization, seeking guidance and allowing for proper management of the conflict. This ensures that decisions are made with integrity and in the best interest of Indofood CBP. Question 2. Which approach would be most appropriate for a procurement manager at Indofood CBP when a long-standing supplier, who has been instrumental in providing key ingredients, offers personal gifts and favors during contract renewal negotiations, hinting at continued favorable terms if the relationship is maintained? Option A. Accept the personal gifts and favors as a gesture of goodwill, believing it will strengthen the relationship and ensure continued favorable terms for Indofood CBP. Option B. Immediately cease all negotiations and sever ties with the supplier due to the perceived conflict of interest, without further discussion or review. Option C. Politely decline the personal gifts and favors, reaffirming Indofood CBP's commitment to objective evaluation based on merit and adherence to company policy, and proceed with the negotiation process based on established criteria. Option D. Report the supplier's offer to senior management and request guidance on how to proceed, while continuing to engage in negotiations as usual. The correct answer is C. Politely decline the personal gifts and favors, reaffirming Indofood CBP's commitment to objective evaluation based on merit and adherence to company policy, and proceed with the negotiation process based on established criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maintaining business relationships and upholding ethical standards, particularly concerning potential conflicts of interest and fair competition. Indofood CBP, as a prominent food and beverage company, operates within a regulated environment that emphasizes transparency and integrity in its dealings with suppliers. The pressure to secure favorable terms, while understandable from a business perspective, must be balanced against the ethical imperative to avoid undue influence or preferential treatment that could disadvantage other suppliers or compromise the integrity of procurement processes. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests without violating established ethical guidelines or potentially applicable regulations. The correct approach involves a commitment to fair and transparent dealings with all suppliers, adhering strictly to Indofood CBP's internal procurement policies and any relevant industry codes of conduct. This means evaluating all suppliers based on objective criteria such as quality, price, reliability, and compliance with ethical standards, rather than being swayed by personal relationships or the promise of future benefits. This approach aligns with principles of good corporate governance and fair competition, ensuring that procurement decisions are made in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders, and that all suppliers are treated equitably. An incorrect approach would be to accept the personal gifts and favors from the supplier. This creates a clear conflict of interest, as it could compromise the objectivity of procurement decisions. The ethical failure lies in the potential for preferential treatment, which could lead to unfair competition among suppliers and potentially result in Indofood CBP procuring goods or services at suboptimal terms. This behavior could also violate internal company policies regarding gifts and entertainment, and potentially create an environment where bribery or corruption could take root. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately terminate the relationship with the supplier without a thorough, objective review of their performance and the nature of the gifts. While vigilance against conflicts of interest is crucial, an abrupt termination based solely on the offer of gifts, without considering the supplier's overall value and adherence to ethical standards, could be seen as an overreaction and potentially damage legitimate business relationships. The ethical failure here is in the lack of due process and objective evaluation, which could lead to an unfair business outcome. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the ethical dilemma and potential conflicts of interest. 2. Consulting relevant company policies and ethical guidelines. 3. Seeking advice from a supervisor or ethics officer if unsure. 4. Making decisions based on objective criteria and principles of fairness and transparency. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind it. Question 3. Implementation of a new marketing campaign for a popular Indofood CBP product is imminent. During the final review, it is discovered that a key ingredient's health benefit, while technically true in a highly specific scientific context, is presented in a way that could be easily misinterpreted by the average consumer as a broader, more significant health advantage than is scientifically supported. The marketing team is pushing for the launch to proceed as planned to meet aggressive sales targets, arguing that the statement is not explicitly false. What is the most ethical and legally sound approach for Indofood CBP to take in this situation? Option A. Downplay the potential for misinterpretation and launch the campaign, focusing on the sales targets and assuming consumers will understand the nuance or not be significantly misled. Option B. Proceed with the launch as planned, with the understanding that Indofood CBP can issue a clarification or recall if consumer complaints or regulatory issues arise later. Option C. Consult with legal counsel to find a loophole in current Indonesian consumer protection laws that might allow the current wording to be used, arguing it is not explicitly false. Option D. Revise the marketing materials to ensure the health benefit is communicated clearly and accurately, reflecting the scientific evidence without misleading the average consumer, even if it delays the launch. The correct answer is D. Revise the marketing materials to ensure the health benefit is communicated clearly and accurately, reflecting the scientific evidence without misleading the average consumer, even if it delays the launch. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. Pressure to meet targets can lead to decisions that compromise integrity, potentially harming Indofood CBP's reputation and leading to legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing pressures ethically and legally. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to Indofood CBP's internal code of conduct and relevant Indonesian regulations concerning product labeling and consumer protection. This means ensuring all product information is accurate and not misleading, even if it means a delay in product launch or a revision of marketing materials. This approach upholds ethical business practices, builds consumer trust, and ensures compliance with laws designed to protect consumers from deceptive practices. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying the potential misrepresentation to expedite the launch would be ethically unsound and legally risky. It would violate principles of honesty and fair dealing with consumers. Such an action could lead to regulatory penalties, consumer lawsuits, and significant damage to Indofood CBP's brand reputation, which is difficult to recover. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the launch and address any potential issues later, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for potential harm to consumers. It assumes that problems can be easily rectified, which is often not the case with regulatory breaches and consumer trust. This reactive stance can lead to more severe consequences than a proactive, ethical decision. A third incorrect approach, which is to seek a loophole in the regulations to justify the current labeling, is a dangerous path. It suggests an intent to circumvent the spirit of the law, even if a literal interpretation might offer a temporary justification. This can be seen as unethical and may still attract regulatory scrutiny if the intent is perceived as deceptive. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough review of all relevant internal policies, ethical guidelines, and applicable Indonesian laws. When faced with ambiguity or pressure, seeking advice from legal counsel and the compliance department is crucial. Prioritizing long-term reputation and ethical conduct over short-term gains is paramount. A commitment to transparency and consumer welfare should guide all decisions. Question 4. The efficiency study reveals that a key supplier for Indofood CBP's new product line has provided documentation indicating a sourcing origin that differs from previous assurances. While the current documentation meets basic quality standards, there is a suspicion that the actual origin might involve less ethical labor practices, which could impact Indofood CBP's brand reputation. What is the most appropriate immediate action for an employee who discovers this discrepancy? Option A. Publicly question the supplier's practices on social media to raise awareness. Option B. Continue to use the supplier as usual, assuming the documentation is sufficient and the discrepancy is minor. Option C. Immediately escalate the concern to the direct supervisor and the company's ethics and compliance department for investigation. Option D. Immediately terminate the contract with the supplier without further investigation. The correct answer is C. Immediately escalate the concern to the direct supervisor and the company's ethics and compliance department for investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Indofood CBP due to the conflict between achieving efficiency targets and maintaining ethical sourcing practices. The challenge lies in balancing the company's immediate financial goals with its long-term reputation and adherence to responsible business conduct, particularly concerning the origin of raw materials. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising ethical standards or potentially violating any undisclosed company policies or industry best practices that might be implicitly expected in a hiring assessment. The correct approach involves escalating the concern through appropriate internal channels, such as reporting to a direct supervisor or the ethics and compliance department. This is the right course of action because it acknowledges the potential ethical issue without making unilateral decisions or taking actions that could be misconstrued. It allows the company to investigate the discrepancy properly and address it according to its established procedures and ethical guidelines. This aligns with principles of corporate responsibility and good governance, ensuring that any identified issues are handled transparently and systematically. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy and proceed with the supplier as usual. This fails to uphold ethical sourcing standards and could expose Indofood CBP to reputational damage and potential future regulatory scrutiny if the supplier's practices are found to be non-compliant with ethical sourcing expectations. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately terminate the relationship with the supplier without proper investigation or consultation. This could lead to unnecessary business disruption, financial loss, and potentially unfair treatment of the supplier if the discrepancy is a minor administrative error. Furthermore, taking such action without following established internal protocols could be seen as insubordination or overstepping one's authority. Professionals should approach such situations by first gathering all available information and identifying the nature of the discrepancy. They should then consult company policies and codes of conduct related to supplier relationships and ethical sourcing. If a potential ethical breach is identified, the next step is to report it through the designated internal channels, allowing the appropriate departments to investigate and make informed decisions. This structured approach ensures that concerns are addressed systematically, ethically, and in accordance with organizational procedures. Question 5. During the evaluation of candidates for a critical supply chain management role at Indofood CBP, a hiring manager is under pressure to fill the position quickly due to an upcoming peak season. The manager is considering several candidates, some of whom have strong academic backgrounds but limited practical experience, while others have extensive industry experience but less impressive academic credentials. The manager is also aware of a candidate who is a relative of a senior executive, which approach best aligns with Indofood CBP's commitment to fair and effective hiring practices under Indonesian employment law. Option A. Focus on candidates with the strongest academic backgrounds, believing they possess the foundational knowledge to adapt quickly to Indofood CBP's specific operational needs. Option B. Prioritize candidates with extensive industry experience, assuming their practical knowledge will be more immediately beneficial, and fast-track their onboarding. Option C. Select the candidate who is a relative of a senior executive, as their potential internal network could be advantageous for the company, and expedite their hiring. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive assessment of all candidates based on a predefined set of objective criteria, including both academic qualifications and practical experience, ensuring a fair comparison and selection process. The correct answer is B. Prioritize candidates with extensive industry experience, assuming their practical knowledge will be more immediately beneficial, and fast-track their onboarding. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical and legal obligations to stakeholders, particularly in the context of a hiring assessment. Indofood CBP, as a prominent food company, operates under Indonesian regulations that emphasize fair employment practices and consumer trust. The pressure to fill positions quickly can lead to overlooking critical due diligence, which could have severe repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the hiring process is not only efficient, but also compliant and ethical, safeguarding the company's reputation and legal standing. The correct approach involves a thorough and unbiased evaluation of all candidates based on merit and suitability for the role, adhering strictly to Indofood CBP's established hiring policies and relevant Indonesian labor laws. This ensures fairness, prevents discrimination, and upholds the integrity of the assessment process. Regulatory justification stems from Indonesian labor laws that mandate equal opportunity in employment and prohibit discriminatory hiring practices. Ethically, it aligns with principles of fairness and transparency expected of a reputable organization. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by fast-tracking candidates based on superficial criteria or personal recommendations without proper assessment fails to meet regulatory requirements for fair hiring. This could lead to legal challenges and damage Indofood CBP's reputation. Another incorrect approach that involves favoring internal candidates or those with existing relationships, regardless of their qualifications, violates principles of meritocracy and equal opportunity, potentially leading to a less competent workforce and accusations of favoritism. An approach that focuses solely on the lowest salary expectations, without considering the candidate's skills and potential contribution, overlooks the long-term value and can result in higher turnover and training costs, indirectly impacting the company's financial health and operational efficiency, and potentially contravening regulations that aim to ensure fair compensation based on role and responsibility. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the objectives of the hiring process, followed by a review of relevant internal policies and external regulations. They should then assess each candidate against objective criteria, ensuring all are treated equitably. Any deviation from established procedures should be critically evaluated for its ethical and legal implications. In situations of pressure, it is crucial to advocate for adherence to best practices, even if it means a slightly longer process to prevent future, more significant problems. Question 6. Quality control measures reveal a potential contamination issue in a batch of Indofood CBP's popular instant noodle product. The contamination, if confirmed, could pose a minor health risk to a specific segment of consumers. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for Indofood CBP's management to take, strictly adhering to Indonesian food safety regulations and ethical stakeholder management principles? Option A. Instruct the quality control team to retest the batch multiple times to ensure the initial findings are accurate, and only if the retests confirm the contamination, then proceed with an internal corrective action plan without immediate external notification. Option B. Issue a voluntary product recall to all retailers and consumers for the affected batch, while continuing the internal investigation to determine the root cause, without initially informing BPOM. Option C. Immediately halt production of the affected product line. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation to confirm the nature and extent of the contamination, and simultaneously notify the Badan Pengawas Obat dan Makanan (BPOM) of the findings and the ongoing investigation. Option D. Continue production and distribution of the product, while conducting a thorough internal investigation over the next several weeks to definitively confirm the contamination and its impact before reporting to any external parties. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt production of the affected product line. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation to confirm the nature and extent of the contamination, and simultaneously notify the Badan Pengawas Obat dan Makanan (BPOM) of the findings and the ongoing investigation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need to address a potential product defect with the company's obligation to maintain transparency and comply with regulatory reporting requirements. Indofood CBP's reputation and consumer trust are at stake, necessitating a response that is both swift and ethically sound, adhering strictly to Indonesian food safety regulations. The correct approach involves immediate internal investigation and notification of relevant authorities. This demonstrates a commitment to consumer safety and regulatory compliance. By proactively engaging with the Badan Pengawas Obat dan Makanan (BPOM) and initiating a thorough internal review, Indofood CBP upholds its responsibility to consumers and the regulatory framework. This aligns with the principles of good manufacturing practices and food safety management systems mandated by Indonesian law, which prioritize consumer well-being and require prompt reporting of potential hazards. An incorrect approach would be to delay reporting to BPOM while conducting a lengthy internal investigation without any external communication. This risks a delayed response to a potential public health issue and could be interpreted as an attempt to conceal or downplay the problem, violating the spirit and letter of food safety regulations that emphasize timely disclosure of risks. Another incorrect approach would be to issue a public recall without first notifying BPOM. While a recall is a necessary step, bypassing the regulatory authority undermines the established reporting channels and could lead to confusion or conflicting directives. Indonesian regulations typically require consultation and coordination with BPOM before initiating widespread product recalls. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to dismiss the quality control findings without further investigation, assuming they are minor anomalies. This disregards the potential for even small defects to escalate into significant safety concerns and fails to meet the due diligence expected of a food manufacturer under Indonesian food safety laws. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes consumer safety, adheres to regulatory mandates, and maintains ethical integrity. This involves a structured approach. First, acknowledging and validating the reported issue. Second, initiating immediate, thorough internal investigation. Third, promptly notifying the relevant regulatory body, BPOM in this case. And fourth, coordinating with the regulator on the appropriate course of action, which may include a recall or other corrective measures. Transparency and proactive communication are paramount throughout this process. Question 7. Performance analysis shows that a key sales representative at Indofood CBP is consistently exceeding their quarterly targets by implying to potential customers that a popular product is in limited supply, thereby creating a sense of urgency to purchase. While the representative does eventually fulfill all orders, this tactic is not explicitly sanctioned by company policy and may mislead consumers about the actual stock levels. What is the most appropriate professional response for Indofood CBP management in this situation? Option A. Ignore the practice as long as all orders are fulfilled and sales targets are met, as it is a common sales tactic. Option B. Acknowledge the sales representative's success and provide a bonus, while discreetly advising them to avoid creating artificial scarcity. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the sales representative's practices. Discuss the implications of their tactics with them in relation to Indonesian consumer protection laws and company ethics policies, and implement corrective actions and further training if necessary. Option D. Immediately terminate the sales representative's employment for deceptive sales practices. The correct answer is B. Acknowledge the sales representative's success and provide a bonus, while discreetly advising them to avoid creating artificial scarcity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Indofood CBP employees due to the inherent conflict between achieving performance targets and adhering to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales quotas can tempt individuals to engage in practices that, while seemingly beneficial in the short term for sales figures, could violate Indonesian consumer protection laws or internal company codes of conduct. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with legal and ethical responsibilities. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and fair dealing with consumers, even if it means potentially lower immediate sales. This aligns with the principles of consumer protection enshrined in Indonesian law, which mandates that businesses provide accurate product information and engage in fair marketing practices. By refusing to mislead consumers about product availability or pricing, employees uphold the company's integrity and avoid potential legal repercussions, fines, and reputational damage. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to ethical business operations, which is crucial for long-term sustainability and trust. An incorrect approach of exaggerating product availability to secure a sale, even with the intention of fulfilling the order later, constitutes a deceptive practice. This violates Indonesian consumer protection regulations that prohibit misleading advertising and false representations about goods or services. Such actions can lead to consumer complaints, regulatory investigations, and penalties. Another incorrect approach of offering undisclosed discounts or incentives to secure a sale, without proper documentation or adherence to company policy, can create an uneven playing field, potentially violate fair trade practices, and lead to internal control issues and financial discrepancies. Finally, an approach that prioritizes meeting sales targets at all costs, disregarding the accuracy of information provided to consumers, demonstrates a severe ethical lapse and a disregard for legal obligations, ultimately undermining the company's reputation and potentially exposing it to significant legal liabilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential conflicts between performance goals and ethical/legal obligations. They should then consult relevant company policies and Indonesian regulations to understand their rights and responsibilities. When faced with a dilemma, seeking guidance from supervisors or the legal/compliance department is paramount. The decision should always favor compliance and ethical conduct, recognizing that short-term gains achieved through questionable means are unsustainable and detrimental in the long run. Question 8. The evaluation methodology shows that Indofood CBP is seeking to enhance its competitive intelligence gathering to inform strategic planning. Considering the regulatory framework and guidelines applicable to Indofood CBP's operations in Indonesia, Which of the following approaches best aligns with ethical and legal standards for obtaining competitive insights? Option A. Engaging in discussions with industry peers at trade associations with the explicit aim of coordinating pricing strategies to ensure market stability. Option B. Analyzing publicly available financial reports, industry news, and market trend analyses to understand competitor performance and strategic directions. Option C. Utilizing data analytics on consumer purchasing patterns to infer competitor product popularity and market share without direct engagement with competitor data. Option D. Actively seeking to obtain non-public, confidential strategic plans from key competitors through discreet inquiries with former employees of rival companies. Correct answer is D. Actively seeking to obtain non-public, confidential strategic plans from key competitors through discreet inquiries with former employees of rival companies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Indofood CBP employees due to the inherent conflict between the desire to secure a competitive advantage and the ethical and regulatory obligations to maintain fair competition and transparency. Navigating this requires a keen understanding of Indofood CBP's internal policies and relevant Indonesian competition laws. The core of the challenge lies in balancing business objectives with legal and ethical boundaries. The correct approach involves leveraging publicly available information and general market intelligence to inform strategic decisions. This respects the spirit of fair competition and avoids any actions that could be construed as anti-competitive or a breach of trust. Specifically, adhering to Indofood CBP's Code of Conduct and Indonesian competition regulations, such as those overseen by the Business Competition Supervisory Commission, KPPU, ensures that any competitive analysis is conducted ethically and legally. This approach prioritizes integrity and long-term sustainability over short-term gains achieved through potentially illicit means. An incorrect approach would be to seek or use confidential information from competitors. This directly violates principles of fair competition and could lead to severe legal repercussions under Indonesian competition law, including fines and reputational damage for Indofood CBP. It also breaches ethical standards of professional conduct, undermining trust among market participants. Another incorrect approach would be to engage in practices that restrict competition, such as price fixing or market allocation, as these are explicitly prohibited by Indonesian competition laws and are detrimental to consumer welfare. Such actions demonstrate a disregard for regulatory frameworks and ethical business practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to the company's code of conduct and all applicable laws and regulations. This involves a proactive assessment of potential actions against these standards, seeking guidance from legal or compliance departments when in doubt, and always choosing the path that upholds integrity and fair play. The focus should be on developing competitive strategies based on legitimate market analysis and internal capabilities, rather than resorting to unethical or illegal information gathering or practices. Question 9. The evaluation methodology shows that when assessing the future prospects of Indofood CBP, a key consideration is how to present potential challenges, such as increased competition and rising raw material costs, alongside anticipated growth opportunities. Which approach best reflects professional and regulatory expectations for Indofood CBP? Option A. Provide a balanced overview of both growth opportunities and potential challenges, ensuring that all material risks and uncertainties are disclosed in accordance with Indonesian financial accounting standards, SAC, and principles of good corporate governance. Option B. Focus exclusively on the positive aspects of growth opportunities, assuming that any challenges will be overcome through future strategic initiatives without explicit disclosure of their current potential impact. Option C. Emphasize all identified growth opportunities and present challenges as minor, manageable issues with minimal impact on future financial performance. Option D. Highlight the most significant growth opportunities and only mention challenges if they have already materialized and had a quantifiable negative impact on current financial statements. The correct answer is C. Emphasize all identified growth opportunities and present challenges as minor, manageable issues with minimal impact on future financial performance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Indofood CBP employees due to the inherent conflict between the company's immediate business interests and the ethical obligation to provide accurate and unbiased information to stakeholders. The pressure to present a favorable financial outlook, even when facing potential headwinds, can lead to decisions that compromise transparency and stakeholder trust. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing pressures and uphold the integrity of financial reporting. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and adherence to the Indonesian Financial Accounting Standards, SAC, and relevant corporate governance principles. This means acknowledging all material risks and uncertainties that could impact Indofood CBP's financial performance, even if they are not yet fully realized. Providing a balanced view, which includes both opportunities and challenges, ensures that stakeholders have a realistic understanding of the company's position. This aligns with the ethical duty of directors and officers to act in the best interests of the company and its shareholders, which includes fostering trust through honest communication. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting positive aspects while downplaying or omitting significant risks would be a failure of professional duty. This would violate the principles of fair presentation and full disclosure mandated by SAC. Such an approach could mislead investors, creditors, and other stakeholders, potentially leading to misinformed investment decisions and reputational damage for Indofood CBP. Furthermore, it could contravene the Indonesian company law, Undang-Undang Perseroan Terbatas, regarding the duties of directors and commissioners to act with good faith and full responsibility. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes short-term stock price performance over long-term sustainable value creation would also be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to aggressive accounting practices or the withholding of crucial negative information, ultimately undermining the company's credibility and long-term viability. This disregards the fundamental principle of fiduciary duty, which requires acting with prudence and in the best interests of the company as a whole, not just its immediate market valuation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves a thorough understanding of applicable accounting standards and corporate governance guidelines. When faced with conflicting pressures, professionals should seek to understand the underlying rationale for reporting requirements and the potential consequences of non-compliance. Open communication with senior management, and if necessary, seeking independent advice are crucial steps in ensuring that decisions are made with integrity and in alignment with stakeholder interests. The ultimate goal is to foster an environment of trust and accountability within Indofood CBP. Question 10. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new, aggressive marketing campaign for Indofood CBP's flagship noodle product has the potential to significantly boost sales in the next fiscal year. However, the projected revenue increase is based on optimistic market penetration assumptions. When presenting these projections to potential investors, what is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for Indofood CBP's management? Option A. Present the most optimistic revenue projections, highlighting the potential upside of the campaign to attract investment. Option B. Provide a range of revenue projections, clearly stating the assumptions and risks associated with the optimistic scenario, and also presenting a more conservative estimate. Option C. Use aggressive accounting methods to recognize a portion of the projected revenue immediately to demonstrate early campaign success. Option D. Focus solely on the costs of the marketing campaign and defer any discussion of revenue projections until actual sales figures are available. The correct answer is A. Present the most optimistic revenue projections, highlighting the potential upside of the campaign to attract investment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Indofood CBP's management team due to the inherent conflict between maximizing short-term financial gains and upholding long-term ethical and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet investor expectations for profitability can lead to decisions that, while appearing beneficial on the surface, carry significant risks if they skirt or violate established guidelines. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests, ensuring that any proposed action aligns with Indofood CBP's commitment to responsible business practices and the relevant regulatory framework. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to the Indonesian Financial Services Authority, OJK, regulations regarding financial reporting and disclosure. This means ensuring that all financial information presented to stakeholders is accurate, complete, and reflects the true economic substance of transactions. Specifically, When considering the impact of a new marketing campaign on future revenue projections, the approach should involve a conservative estimation of potential returns, supported by robust market research and historical data, and clearly communicating any assumptions or uncertainties to investors. This aligns with OJK's mandate to protect investors and maintain market integrity by preventing misleading financial information. An incorrect approach would be to inflate projected revenue figures to create a more favorable impression of the marketing campaign's immediate impact. This is ethically questionable, as it misrepresents the company's financial health and can mislead investors into making investment decisions based on inaccurate data. From a regulatory standpoint, this violates OJK's principles of fair disclosure and could lead to penalties for misstatement of financial information. Another incorrect approach would be to selectively disclose only the positive aspects of the campaign's potential, while omitting any potential risks or downsides. This lack of full disclosure is a direct contravention of OJK's requirements for comprehensive and balanced reporting. Investors have a right to understand the full picture, including potential challenges, before making investment decisions. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to use aggressive accounting practices to recognize anticipated revenue prematurely, before it is earned or realized. This practice, often referred to as revenue recognition manipulation, is a serious regulatory and ethical breach. OJK regulations, like those in most jurisdictions, require revenue to be recognized when it is earned and realized, not when it is merely anticipated. Such actions undermine the reliability of financial statements and erode investor confidence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations at Indofood CBP should involve a multifaceted evaluation. First, a thorough understanding of the relevant OJK regulations and ethical codes of conduct is paramount. Second, any proposed action should be assessed for its potential impact on all stakeholders, not just shareholders. Third, a robust internal control system should be in place to review and approve financial projections and reporting. Finally, fostering a culture of ethical conduct and encouraging open communication about potential risks and challenges are crucial for maintaining long-term trust and sustainability. Question 11. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of environmental noncompliance from a potential new supplier for Indofood CBP's packaging materials, which offers a significant cost saving. What is the most responsible course of action for Indofood CBP's procurement team? Option A. Proceed with the new supplier due to the substantial cost savings, assuming the environmental risk is manageable and unlikely to materialize. Option B. Postpone the decision until a more concrete environmental incident occurs to better assess the risk. Option C. Conduct a thorough due diligence investigation into the potential supplier's environmental practices and compliance records before making a decision. Option D. Negotiate a lower price with the supplier to offset any potential future environmental remediation costs. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the new supplier due to the substantial cost savings, assuming the environmental risk is manageable and unlikely to materialize. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of Indofood CBP with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to meet targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential risks, especially those that are not immediately quantifiable or have a less direct impact on short-term profits. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are not solely driven by financial performance, but also by adherence to established ethical standards and regulatory compliance, which are crucial for sustainable business operations and maintaining stakeholder trust. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent engagement with the identified risks, prioritizing mitigation strategies that align with Indofood CBP's stated commitment to sustainability and responsible business practices. This means not just acknowledging the risk of potential environmental impact from a new supplier, but actively investigating the supplier's practices, seeking assurances of compliance, and developing contingency plans. This approach is justified by the regulatory framework governing corporate responsibility and ethical sourcing, which increasingly mandates due diligence and responsible supply chain management. It also aligns with ethical principles of corporate citizenship, emphasizing the importance of minimizing negative externalities and contributing positively to society and the environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost-effectiveness of the new supplier, disregarding the potential environmental risks, fails to meet regulatory expectations for due diligence and risk assessment. This approach exhibits a disregard for potential legal liabilities and reputational damage that could arise from environmental noncompliance or harm. Another incorrect approach that involves delaying the investigation into the supplier's environmental practices until a problem arises is a reactive and irresponsible strategy. This failure to act proactively constitutes a breach of ethical duty and potentially regulatory requirements for risk management. It exposes Indofood CBP to significant unforeseen costs, legal penalties, and severe reputational damage, undermining stakeholder confidence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates risk assessment with ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the identified risks and their potential consequences, both financial and non-financial. 2. Evaluating potential mitigation strategies, considering their feasibility, cost, and effectiveness. 3. Consulting relevant internal policies, ethical guidelines, and external regulations. 4. Seeking input from relevant departments, e.g., legal, compliance, sustainability. 5. Making a decision that prioritizes long-term sustainability, ethical conduct, and regulatory adherence, even if it involves short-term financial trade-offs. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows that Indofood CBP's strategic objective for the upcoming fiscal year includes aggressive market share expansion. In light of this, a sales manager is considering how to best present the company's financial performance to stakeholders. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional and regulatory expectations for Indofood CBP? Option A. Focus on presenting revenue figures that highlight the projected growth, even if some sales are not yet fully recognized according to SAC. Option B. Accelerate the recognition of anticipated future sales to demonstrate significant progress towards the market share expansion goal. Option C. Ensure all revenue and expense recognition strictly adheres to SAC and Indofood CBP's internal accounting policies, providing a transparent and accurate financial picture. Option D. Minimize the reporting of certain operational expenses that might detract from the perception of rapid growth. The correct answer is A. Focus on presenting revenue figures that highlight the projected growth, even if some sales are not yet fully recognized according to SAC. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Indofood CBP employees due to the inherent conflict between the company's strategic growth objectives and the ethical imperative to maintain accurate and transparent financial reporting. The pressure to achieve ambitious targets can inadvertently lead individuals to consider shortcuts or misinterpretations of accounting standards, potentially jeopardizing the integrity of financial statements. Careful judgment is required to navigate these pressures while upholding professional responsibilities. The correct approach involves a commitment to adhering strictly to Indofood CBP's internal accounting policies and relevant Indonesian financial accounting standards, SAC. This means ensuring all transactions are recorded accurately, supported by proper documentation, and reflect the true economic substance of the events. Professionals must exercise due diligence in applying accounting principles, seeking clarification from senior management or the accounting department when in doubt, and proactively identifying and addressing any potential misstatements. This approach is justified by the fundamental ethical and regulatory obligations to present a true and fair view of the company's financial position, as mandated by SAC and the principles of good corporate governance. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize meeting the growth targets at the expense of accounting accuracy. For instance, selectively recognizing revenue before it is earned or deferring expenses inappropriately to inflate reported profits would constitute a violation of SAC and ethical principles. This misrepresentation can mislead stakeholders, including investors, creditors, and regulatory bodies, and can lead to severe legal and reputational consequences for Indofood CBP. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook or downplay discrepancies identified during internal reviews, assuming they are minor or will be resolved later. This passive stance fails to address potential issues promptly, allowing them to escalate and potentially become material misstatements, thereby breaching the duty of care and professional skepticism expected of employees. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes integrity and compliance. This involves understanding the company's code of conduct and relevant accounting standards, actively seeking to understand the underlying business rationale for financial reporting decisions, and maintaining professional skepticism. When faced with pressure or ambiguity, professionals should escalate concerns through appropriate channels, such as their direct supervisor, the internal audit department, or a designated ethics hotline, to ensure issues are addressed transparently and in accordance with regulatory requirements. Question 13. Investigation of a scenario where an Indofood CBP employee, privy to upcoming positive financial results that have not yet been publicly announced, considers purchasing shares of Indofood CBP. What is the most appropriate course of action for this employee, considering their ethical obligations and regulatory compliance? Option A. Refrain from trading Indofood CBP shares and maintain strict confidentiality of the non-public information until it is officially disclosed. Option B. Discuss the upcoming results with close friends and family, encouraging them to consider investing in Indofood CBP shares. Option C. Delay reporting the potential insider information to the company's compliance department until after the stock price has adjusted to the news. Option D. Proceed with purchasing shares, as the information is likely to lead to a higher stock price and represents a personal financial opportunity. The correct answer is D. Proceed with purchasing shares, as the information is likely to lead to a higher stock price and represents a personal financial opportunity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Indofood CBP employee due to the inherent conflict between personal financial interests and the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for insider information to be misused, leading to unfair market advantages and breaches of trust. Adhering to the regulatory framework of the Indofood CBP hiring assessment test, which implicitly aligns with Indonesian capital market regulations and corporate governance principles, is paramount. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to Indofood CBP's internal policies and relevant Indonesian capital market laws regarding the handling of material non-public information. This means refraining from trading on any information that has not been publicly disclosed and is likely to affect the company's share price. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant, preventing insider trading and upholding market integrity. It aligns with the principles of fair disclosure and equal access to information for all investors, as mandated by regulations like the Indonesian Capital Market Law, Undang-Undang Pasar Modal. An incorrect approach would be to trade based on the anticipated positive news. This is a direct violation of insider trading regulations, which prohibit individuals from trading securities based on material non-public information. Such an action would not only be unethical, but also carry severe legal penalties, including fines and imprisonment, and damage Indofood CBP's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the information with close friends or family who are not authorized to receive it, even if the employee does not trade themselves. This constitutes tipping, which is also an illegal form of insider trading. The information, if material and non-public, should be kept confidential until officially released. A third incorrect approach would be to delay reporting the potential insider information to the appropriate internal compliance department. Prompt reporting is crucial for the company to manage the information responsibly and ensure timely public disclosure, thereby mitigating any potential market manipulation or unfair advantage. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves a clear understanding of company policies and relevant laws, a commitment to confidentiality, and a proactive approach to reporting any potential breaches or conflicts of interest to the designated compliance or legal department. When in doubt, seeking guidance from superiors or the compliance team is always the most prudent course of action. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows that Indofood CBP is assessing candidates for a financial reporting role. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates an understanding of the company's obligations to its stakeholders and the regulatory environment in Indonesia? Option A. Probing the candidate's understanding of the principles of accurate and timely financial disclosure, the importance of transparency to investors, and their awareness of relevant OJK and BEI regulations. Option B. Evaluating the candidate's proficiency in using accounting software and their ability to generate financial statements quickly. Option C. focusing on the candidate's experience in managing large financial datasets and their aptitude for data analysis without delving into disclosure ethics. Option D. Assessing the candidate's knowledge of Indofood CBP's financial performance trends and their ability to identify potential cost-saving measures. The correct answer is B. Evaluating the candidate's proficiency in using accounting software and their ability to generate financial statements quickly. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where Indofood CBP, as a publicly listed company, is undergoing a hiring assessment. This presents a professional challenge because the assessment must not only evaluate a candidate's suitability for a role, but also uphold the integrity and ethical standards expected of a company operating within the Indonesian regulatory framework, particularly concerning financial reporting and corporate governance. The pressure to fill a position quickly must be balanced against the imperative to select candidates who understand and will adhere to these standards. The correct approach involves assessing the candidate's understanding of Indofood CBP's disclosure obligation and their implications for stakeholder trust. This is crucial because Indonesian financial regulations, such as those issued by the Otoritas Jasa Keuangan (OJK) and the Bursa Efek Indonesia (BEI), mandate transparency and accuracy in financial reporting. A candidate who demonstrates an awareness of these requirements and the ethical responsibility to uphold them is essential for maintaining investor confidence and regulatory compliance. This approach aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the legal obligations of listed entities to provide timely and accurate information to the public. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize a candidate's immediate technical skills without probing their understanding of ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. For instance, focusing solely on a candidate's ability to manipulate financial data without considering the ethical implications or regulatory boundaries would be a significant failure. This overlooks the fundamental requirement for all employees, especially those in positions of responsibility, to act with integrity and in accordance with Indonesian laws and OJK/BEI guidelines. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the importance of stakeholder communication and transparency, viewing it as a secondary concern. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of how crucial accurate and timely disclosures are for maintaining market confidence and fulfilling legal obligations, potentially leading to reputational damage and regulatory penalties for Indofood CBP. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates technical competence with a strong ethical compass and a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory landscape. This involves designing assessment questions that probe not only how a task is done, but also why it is done in a particular way, considering the ethical and legal ramifications. When evaluating candidates, a holistic view that encompasses their awareness of corporate responsibility, regulatory compliance, and ethical decision-making is paramount, especially for companies like Indofood CBP that are subject to stringent public scrutiny and regulatory oversight. Question 15. The evaluation methodology shows that Indofood CBP's internal audit team is tasked with reviewing the compliance aspects of a new snack product launch. The team has identified potential ambiguities in the labeling requirements for a novel ingredient. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory adherence while facilitating a timely market entry? Option A. Engage proactively with the Indonesian National Agency of Drug and Food Control (BPOM) and the product development team to clarify labeling requirements for the novel ingredient before finalizing product packaging and proceeding with the launch. Option B. Halt the product launch immediately until a definitive legal opinion on the ingredient's labeling is obtained, regardless of the time this may take. Option C. Proceed with the launch, assuming the ingredient's labeling is acceptable based on similar existing products, and address any potential issues post-launch. Option D. Delegate the responsibility of interpreting the labeling requirements to the marketing department, trusting their understanding of consumer perception. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the launch, assuming the ingredient's labeling is acceptable based on similar existing products, and address any potential issues post-launch. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where Indofood CBP's internal audit team is reviewing a new product launch. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely market entry with ensuring all regulatory compliance aspects are thoroughly addressed. This requires a nuanced understanding of Indofood CBP's operational context and the relevant Indonesian food safety and labeling regulations. Professional judgment is crucial to avoid either delaying a profitable launch unnecessarily or, conversely, risking noncompliance and potential penalties. The correct approach involves a proactive and collaborative engagement with the Regulatory Affairs Department and relevant product development teams. This ensures that potential compliance issues are identified and resolved early in the product development lifecycle. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and risk management, which are implicitly expected under Indonesian business law and industry best practices. Specifically, it demonstrates a commitment to adhering to the regulations set forth by the Indonesian National Agency of Drug and Food Control, BPOM, concerning food product safety, ingredients, and labeling, thereby protecting consumer health and maintaining Indofood CBP's reputation. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness would fail to adequately assess potential risks associated with ingredient sourcing or labeling accuracy. This could lead to violations of BPOM regulations, resulting in product recalls, fines, and damage to Indofood CBP's brand image. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on internal processes without considering external regulatory requirements would be equally detrimental. This overlooks the fundamental obligation to comply with national laws governing food production and distribution. A third incorrect approach that relies on assumptions about regulatory compliance without verification would expose Indofood CBP to significant legal and financial liabilities. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that emphasizes a risk-based approach. This involves identifying potential compliance hurdles early, consulting with subject matter experts, both internal and external, and documenting all compliance checks and approvals. A commitment to continuous learning about evolving regulatory landscapes is also vital. Question 16. When evaluating a new product launch strategy for Indofood CBP that may involve complex revenue recognition considerations, what is the most appropriate approach to ensure compliance with Indonesian financial reporting standards and capital market regulations? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed revenue recognition treatment on Indofood CBP's financial statements, considering all relevant SAC and OJK guidelines, and consult with independent auditors. Option B. Proceed with the revenue recognition treatment that management believes is most straightforward to implement, without extensive review of specific SAC or OJK pronouncements to expedite the launch. Option C. Prioritize the revenue recognition method that is likely to result in the most favorable immediate impact on Indofood CBP's reported earnings and share price, assuming it can be explained to investors. Option D. Seek advice from industry peers on their revenue recognition practices for similar product launches, and adopt a method that is commonly used, even if its regulatory compliance for Indofood CBP is not fully verified. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed revenue recognition treatment on Indofood CBP's financial statements, considering all relevant SAC and OJK guidelines, and consult with independent auditors. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Indofood CBP, as a publicly listed company, is subject to stringent regulations regarding its financial reporting and disclosure obligations. The pressure to meet investor expectations and maintain share price stability can create an environment where management might be tempted to misrepresent financial performance. Navigating this requires a strong ethical compass and a thorough understanding of regulatory frameworks to ensure transparency and accuracy. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective impact assessment of the proposed accounting treatment on Indofood CBP's financial statements and compliance with relevant Indonesian financial reporting standards, SAC, and capital market regulations. This approach is correct because it prioritizes adherence to accounting principles and regulatory requirements. By systematically evaluating the implications, the company ensures that its financial reporting is not only accurate but also compliant, thereby safeguarding investor trust and avoiding potential legal repercussions. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the ethical duty of management to present a true and fair view of the company's financial position. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the short-term positive impact on share price without a comprehensive regulatory review is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from prioritizing market perception over regulatory compliance, which can lead to misstatements and potential violations of SAC and OJK, Autoritas Jasa regulations. Another incorrect approach that involves seeking external advice to justify a potentially aggressive accounting treatment, rather than objectively assessing its validity, demonstrates a lack of integrity and a disregard for professional skepticism. This can result in a compromised audit and further regulatory scrutiny. Finally, an approach that delays the assessment until after the reporting period risks missing critical deadlines for accurate disclosure and could be interpreted as an attempt to obscure information, leading to severe penalties. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the relevant regulatory landscape. This involves identifying applicable accounting standards and securities laws. Next, they should objectively analyze the proposed transaction or accounting treatment against these standards, considering all potential impacts. If there is any ambiguity or potential for misinterpretation, seeking clarification from independent auditors or regulatory bodies is crucial. The ultimate decision must be grounded in compliance and ethical considerations, ensuring that financial reporting is transparent, accurate, and serves the best interests of all stakeholders, not just short-term market sentiment. Question 17. Benchmark analysis indicates that Indofood CBP is considering a new, aggressive marketing campaign for a popular snack product aimed at increasing market share. However, preliminary internal discussions suggest that some of the proposed claims in the campaign might be perceived as exaggerated by consumer advocacy groups and could potentially lead to competitor challenges. What is the most prudent approach for Indofood CBP to take regarding this marketing campaign? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify and evaluate potential legal, ethical, and reputational risks associated with the campaign's claims and messaging, and develop mitigation strategies before launch. Option B. Proceed with the marketing campaign as planned to capitalize on the current market momentum, assuming that any potential issues can be addressed reactively if they arise. Option C. Delay the campaign indefinitely until all possible objections from consumer groups and competitors can be preemptively resolved, even if it means missing a key market window. Option D. Modify the campaign slightly to tone down the most controversial claims, but launch it quickly to avoid losing a competitive advantage. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the marketing campaign as planned to capitalize on the current market momentum, assuming that any potential issues can be addressed reactively if they arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid growth and the imperative to adhere to regulatory compliance and ethical business practices. Indofood CBP, as a prominent food and beverage company, operates within a highly regulated industry where consumer safety, product integrity, and fair competition are paramount. The pressure to expand market share or introduce new products quickly can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential risks, making a thorough impact assessment crucial. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive assessment of the potential ramifications of any significant business decision, such as a new product launch or market expansion. This includes identifying potential legal, ethical, operational, and reputational risks. For Indofood CBP, this would involve scrutinizing the proposed marketing campaign for compliance with Indonesian advertising standards, consumer protection laws, and ethical guidelines regarding product claims. It requires a systematic evaluation of how the campaign might affect consumer perception, competitor actions, and the company's overall brand image, ensuring that any potential negative impacts are identified and mitigated before implementation. This aligns with the principles of responsible corporate governance and risk management, which are implicitly expected of companies operating within the Indonesian regulatory framework. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the marketing campaign without a thorough impact assessment, prioritizing speed to market over due diligence. This could lead to violations of Indonesian advertising laws, such as those prohibiting misleading claims or unfair comparative advertising, resulting in regulatory penalties, fines, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial assessment that only considers immediate sales projections while ignoring potential long-term consequences like consumer backlash due to perceived ethical breaches or negative media attention. This demonstrates a failure to uphold ethical business conduct and a disregard for the broader societal impact of Indofood CBP's operations, which can erode consumer trust and brand loyalty. Professionals at Indofood CBP should employ a decision-making framework that mandates a structured impact assessment for all significant strategic initiatives. This framework should include steps for risk identification, analysis, evaluation, and mitigation. Before approving any campaign or strategic move, a cross-functional team should review the findings of the impact assessment, ensuring that all potential negative consequences have been adequately addressed, and that the proposed action aligns with Indofood CBP's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance within Indonesia. Question 18. Analysis of a situation where an Indofood CBP procurement officer, responsible for selecting a new packaging supplier, discovers that one of the leading candidate vendors is owned by their sibling spouse. The officer has a close personal relationship with their sibling and their spouse. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Indofood CBP procurement officer to ensure ethical conduct and compliance with company policy? Option A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and the company's ethics committee, and recuse themselves from any further decision-making regarding this vendor selection process. Option B. Proceed with evaluating all vendors impartially, believing their professional integrity will prevent any personal bias from influencing the decision, and not disclose the relationship. Option C. Discreetly favor the vendor owned by their sibling spouse throughout the evaluation process, assuming that such a minor personal connection would not be discovered or negatively impact Indofood CBP. Option D. Inform their sibling that they are evaluating the vendor, but assure them that their professional judgment will not be compromised, and continue with the selection process without formal disclosure to Indofood CBP. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and the company's ethics committee, and recuse themselves from any further decision-making regarding this vendor selection process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Indofood CBP employee because it requires navigating potential conflicts of interest and upholding the company's ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in balancing personal relationships with professional responsibilities, ensuring that decisions are made impartially and in the best interest of Indofood CBP, rather than being influenced by personal connections. Careful judgment is required to identify and manage situations where such influence might arise, even unintentionally. The correct approach involves proactively identifying the potential conflict of interest and disclosing it to the appropriate authority within Indofood CBP. This demonstrates integrity and adherence to ethical guidelines that prioritize transparency and prevent undue influence on business decisions. By disclosing the relationship, the employee allows Indofood CBP to implement appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from decision-making processes or reassignment of duties, thereby protecting the company's interests and maintaining its reputation. This aligns with general principles of corporate governance and ethical conduct expected of employees in any reputable organization, including those operating under Indonesian business regulations. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the vendor selection process without disclosing the personal relationship. This failure constitutes a breach of ethical conduct and potentially violates internal company policies designed to prevent conflicts of interest. It creates an environment where decisions might be perceived as biased, undermining trust and fairness. Furthermore, it could lead to the selection of a vendor based on personal ties rather than merit, potentially resulting in suboptimal outcomes for Indofood CBP, such as higher costs or lower quality of goods or services. This also risks reputational damage to Indofood CBP if the preferential treatment is discovered. Another incorrect approach is to assume that the personal relationship is insignificant and therefore does not warrant disclosure. This underestimation of the potential for perceived or actual bias is a critical ethical lapse. Even if the employee believes they can remain impartial, the mere existence of a close personal relationship with a vendor representative can create an appearance of impropriety, which can be as damaging as actual misconduct. This approach fails to recognize the importance of maintaining public trust and the company's commitment to fair dealing. A final incorrect approach is to attempt to conceal the relationship while still participating in the decision-making process. This is a deliberate act of deception that violates fundamental principles of honesty and integrity. It not only exposes the employee to disciplinary action, but also puts Indofood CBP at significant risk, as it suggests a willingness to engage in unethical practices. Such concealment erodes the foundation of trust within the organization and with external stakeholders. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Indofood CBP's Code of Conduct and Conflict of Interest policies. When faced with a situation that might involve a conflict of interest, an employee should first identify the potential conflict. This involves considering any personal relationships, financial interests, or external affiliations that could reasonably be perceived to influence their professional judgment. The next step is to err on the side of caution and disclose the potential conflict to their supervisor or the designated ethics officer. This proactive disclosure allows the company to assess the situation and implement appropriate measures to mitigate any risks. If unsure, seeking guidance from HR or legal departments is crucial. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all business decisions are made in the best interest of Indofood CBP, free from personal bias or the appearance of impropriety. Question 19. Market research demonstrates that a new Indonesian regulation concerning food product labeling and ingredient disclosure is set to be implemented in 6 months. For Indofood CBP, what is the most prudent and professionally responsible approach to assess and address the potential impact of this regulation on its existing and upcoming product lines? Option A. Prioritize immediate cost-saving measures in product development and marketing to offset any potential future compliance expenses, assuming the regulation's impact will be manageable. Option B. Rely on informal discussions with industry peers and a quick review of the regulation's summary to gauge its potential effects and make minor adjustments as needed. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment involving legal, R&D, marketing, and supply chain teams to identify all necessary adjustments to product formulations, packaging, labeling, and marketing strategies, and develop a phased implementation plan. Option D. Postpone a detailed assessment until closer to the regulation's effective date, focusing current efforts on sales and production targets. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment involving legal, R&D, marketing, and supply chain teams to identify all necessary adjustments to product formulations, packaging, labeling, and marketing strategies, and develop a phased implementation plan. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Indofood CBP employees due to the inherent conflict between business objectives and regulatory compliance. The need to quickly assess the impact of a new regulation on product development and market entry requires a nuanced understanding of both internal processes and external legal frameworks. Careful judgment is essential to ensure that the company's response is both timely and legally sound, avoiding potential penalties and reputational damage. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that meticulously analyzes the new regulation's implications across all relevant business functions within Indofood CBP. This includes evaluating changes needed in product formulation, packaging, labeling, marketing strategies, and supply chain logistics. This approach is professionally sound because it aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory adherence. Specifically, it demonstrates a proactive commitment to understanding and complying with the Indonesian regulatory framework governing food products, ensuring that all operations remain within legal boundaries. This systematic evaluation minimizes the risk of noncompliance, which could lead to fines, product recalls, or market access restrictions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without a thorough regulatory review would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from prioritizing short-term financial gains over long-term legal and ethical obligations. Such an approach risks overlooking critical compliance requirements, potentially leading to significant financial penalties and severe damage to Indofood CBP's reputation. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few key individuals, rather than a structured impact assessment, is also professionally unsound. This method lacks the rigor required for accurate regulatory interpretation and application. It can lead to misinterpretations of the regulation's scope and intent, resulting in non-compliance and potential legal repercussions. A third incorrect approach that delays the assessment until after the regulation's effective date is a critical failure in professional responsibility. This reactive stance demonstrates a lack of foresight and preparedness, exposing Indofood CBP to immediate noncompliance risks and potential enforcement actions. It undermines the company's commitment to operating ethically and legally. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing a clear protocol for monitoring regulatory changes. Upon identification of a new regulation, a cross-functional team should be convened to conduct a detailed impact assessment. This assessment should involve legal counsel, product development, marketing, and operations teams to ensure all facets of the business are considered. The findings should then inform a strategic plan for implementation, with clear timelines and assigned responsibilities, ensuring that Indofood CBP remains compliant and competitive. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that a proposed change in inventory valuation method for certain raw materials at Indofood CBP could significantly reduce reported cost of goods sold in the short term, potentially improving profit margins. However, the change might not accurately reflect the actual flow of goods and could be perceived as aggressive accounting. What is the most appropriate approach for Indofood CBP to take in assessing this situation? Option A. Proceed with the change immediately to capitalize on the short-term profit improvement, as this aligns with the company's goal of enhancing financial performance. Option B. Delay the decision indefinitely, citing potential complexities, without undertaking any formal evaluation of the proposed change. Option C. Implement the change without detailed assessment, assuming that any accounting method that reduces costs is acceptable for improving profitability. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, evaluating the financial, operational, and regulatory implications of the proposed change against applicable Indonesian financial accounting standards, SAC, and company policy, and document the findings thoroughly. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the change immediately to capitalize on the short-term profit improvement, as this aligns with the company's goal of enhancing financial performance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving operational efficiency and upholding the integrity of financial reporting, particularly within the context of Indofood CBP's commitment to compliance. The pressure to meet targets can sometimes lead to overlooking or misinterpreting accounting treatments, necessitating a robust impact assessment to ensure all potential consequences are understood before any action is taken. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with regulatory obligations. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented impact assessment that considers the financial, operational, and regulatory implications of any proposed accounting change. This approach is professionally sound because it aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and adherence to accounting standards relevant to Indofood CBP's operations. Specifically, it ensures that any adjustments are made in accordance with applicable Indonesian financial accounting standards, SAC, and relevant company policies, thereby maintaining the accuracy and reliability of financial statements. This proactive evaluation prevents unintended consequences and demonstrates a commitment to transparency and compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost savings without considering the broader implications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the potential for misstatement of financial results, which could lead to regulatory penalties, damage to Indofood CBP's reputation, and erosion of investor confidence. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing changes without proper documentation or consultation with relevant departments, e.g., internal audit, finance leadership, would also be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This lack of due diligence increases the risk of errors, non-compliance with SAC, and an inability to provide adequate justification to auditors or regulators if questioned. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the proposed change and its intended benefits. Second, conduct a comprehensive impact assessment covering financial reporting, internal controls, operational processes, in compliance with all relevant regulations and accounting standards. Third, consult with key stakeholders, including finance, legal, and internal audit teams. Fourth, document the assessment findings and the rationale for the final decision. Finally, ensure that any approved changes are implemented in a controlled manner and that the financial statements accurately reflect the economic substance of the transactions.